Look, I can't decide whether this channel is going to be super serious, academic, or jokey and fun, so we're just going to smash the two together and see what sticks, alright? Yeah, I know the world is falling apart. I don't care. We're talking about comic book bullshit. Cool? So Marvel put out character sheets for this new superhero team, and one of the things that interested me was that one of the heroes identified as non-binary. Cool, I thought. Being a non-binary person myself, maybe there'd be some interesting things to talk about. Representation in general is a good thing, and then I read the article. Firstly, let me give some positive thoughts. Be negative. I fucking love this guy. His design is so goofy, it's awesome. He's so over the top, he looks like someone half remembered a trip to Hot Topic. I feel so bad for him, because if he were by himself, I'd love him. I mean, for fuck's sake, he's a twink vampire. You know what? Make this guy trans, give him his own book. Wait, is he wearing pants, or is he like Alan Rickman in Dogma? Whatever. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate these characters, I think they're trying, but what Dan Kibblesmith has come up with is almost satirical. If I didn't know any better, I'd think he was writing these characters as a joke at the expense of Gen Z culture. Seriously. Screen Time is a meme-obsessed super teen exposed to experimental internet gas. This reads like a bad first draft. Trailblazer is just kind of there. Like, I can't even tell what her power is. The design is mediocre. Like, please someone call Rebecca Sugar and ask her how to draw convincing plus-size characters. And then we come to the thing that finally made me click and has literally captured my thoughts for like the last month. And that's Snowflake and Safe Space. Now let's set aside the generic visual design. Again, this looks like the artist's first stab at drawing these characters. And to give him credit, there's not much to work with. Just first, these names. This was what first made me think these characters were jokes at the expense of internet culture. Snowflake and Safe Space are both terms that, historically speaking, are used by the alt-right and those adjacent to them to marginalize and demean non-binary people. In fact, the term originally comes from the book Fight Club, and the much more popular with the alt-right film adaptation.
You are not special. You are not a beautiful or unique snowflake.
Actually, there's a lot to dig into about Fight Club and how badly those who love the movie misread the message, but that's for another day. The point is that there's a lot of historical baggage in using that particular term, and ditto with Safe Space, although that word's origins and usage are a lot blurrier. Here, it feels like Dan Kibblesmith, I should remind you, being a middle-aged, straight white man, as far as I can tell, is trying to reclaim a slur. The queer community has reclaimed a few symbols and slurs. The pink triangle that was used to denote gay men and trans women in Nazi death camps is kind of now worn as a badge of honor by some queer people, including myself. And the word queer was a slur in the early days of the movement, but has since been somewhat reclaimed. Actually, there's a lot of LGBTQ people who are unsure about the usage of the word queer, and generally speaking, that falls on generational lines. Younger people are a lot more likely to use it, and older people less so, possibly because it was thrown at them like a weapon. Where we get especially blurry is the question of whether slurs should be reclaimed at all, and if so, when and how. The word faggot is generally seen as not okay by the community at large, and it gets even muddier when it gets into the territory of words that are fairly recent in usage. Fight Club came out in 1999, the film adaptation. That's 2 years after I was born. People have been using snowflake as a derogatory term for Gen Zers, trans, and especially non-binary people for less time than I've been on the internet discoursing. And that's messed up, because the writer is not a part of the very marginalized group of people that he's writing this character to represent. This isn't representation. This is a caricature. And I find it actually offensive. And at the risk of sounding like a stereotype, I have a Discord chat log of my initial reaction to reading the character descriptions. Because obviously, 1 minute you're screaming racist shit on Xbox Live, and 5 years later you're in a Discord call with 3 other trans women playing Halo and obsessing over your estrogen doses. And that, kids, is the true trans agenda. bad jokes aside, it's not hard to believe that Marvel signed off on this. Marvel is, after all, an arm of the all-powerful Walt Disney Company, which at this point is approaching Lovecraftian levels of massive, sprawling tentacles. Disney has a rocky history with its own uncomfortable past, and see the excellent Lindsay Ellis video on the topic for more info on that. But what bothers me even more than just the name is the criminal lack of effort that was made to break away from stereotypes. The character design plays into the stereotype of what non-binary people look like and exists to reinforce it, especially because the look feels targeted at a primarily cisgender audience. In effect, it's watering down the experience of being non-binary in this world and attaching it to a brand new character where it loses all of its impact and who will be deleted from continuity the second the books start gathering dust on the shelves of the handful of comic book stores that still exist. So we know what happened. But how do we fix it? My number one piece of advice is to not assume that you can just throw the label on a brand new character and expect it to have the same impact. Especially if when you do that, you have the character in question written by someone who doesn't belong to the group you're trying to represent. Representation and voices of non-binary individuals means seeking out creators from these marginalized groups and giving them a platform to express themselves. And I guarantee you more people would be buying your comics and then later on seeing your movies and streaming your shows if effort was put in to hear the voices of those groups. I mean, seriously, Disney, hop on the queer bandwagon now. We'll stand you harder than the Democrats stand Joe Biden. Another nugget of advice I have is to not be afraid to do it with an established character. Part of the LGBTQ experience is the idea of coming out and forever changing the way that people around you see you, and this can be daunting. A story where a canonically female superhero comes out as a trans man would be very empowering to young trans people who don't see themselves in media. And they'd buy your comics, they'd buy your toys, your Funko Pops, your posters, your movie tickets, your streaming services, your clothing, your soundtracks, your Broadway musicals. Oh, especially your Broadway musicals. And yeah, if you did that, you'd have to stick with it. Because you'd have to be confident that it's the right thing to do. Because it is the right thing to do. There's an infamous quote attributed to Michael Eisner, but I love it because it's shameless in showing off Disney's ethic as a company. The pursuit of making money is the only reason to make movies. We have no obligation to make history. We have no obligation to make art. We have no obligation to make a statement. But here's the part that's often cut off, and what I think is the most important part. Our obligation is to make money. And to make money, it may be important to make history. To make money, it may be important to make art or some significant statement. To make money, it may be important to win an Academy Award, for it might mean another $10 million at the box office. Trans people aren't going away. You can either embrace it, or let DC beat you to this one too. Also, hire Sam Levinson to make the She-Hulk series. You're welcome.